Hello, everyone. I am absolutely thrilled to say hi to you in this month's Jornada de Actuarización of the Colegio Nacional de Actuarios. My name is José Daniel López Barrientos, and I'll be your host for today's session. Today we have a very special and very important speaker. I'm talking about Mr. John Robinson. Hello, John.
Hello, Jorge. Jose, sorry. Good afternoon.
John is the president of the Society of Actuaries. And right now, I will take a minute, and just a minute, to read a really, really brief resume of John's. Because that's actually quite long. So, okay. So, John Robinson recently retired as an actuary with the Minnesota Department of Commerce, where he was responsible for reviewing the actuarial components of the annual statements of the life insurance companies domiciled in Minnesota, and for providing actuarial support in the reviews of life insurance and annuity product fillings. He also represented Minnesota on various committees with the National Association Insurance Commissioners. His prior actuarial roles were in other pension employee benefit valuations, life insurance, and pensions. John previously served as a member of the SOA Board of Directors. He volunteers regularly as an SOA exam grader with the SOA's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee and the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Research Advisory Committee. John previously served as president of the International Association of Black Actuaries. He holds a bachelor's in mathematics from the University of West Indies, Jamaica. He also has a master's in statistics from the University of Delaware. And he also has yet another master's in statistics from Florida State University. I am absolutely thrilled about receiving you in this seminar, John.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for being here.
Sure. All right. Okay. Good afternoon, all. Buenas tardes. This afternoon, I am going to spend a little time with you talking about my career, and then I'll talk about the Society of Actuaries. And then following that, if you have any questions, I'll certainly be happy to answer them. So I'm going to start with a little bit about my life story, what that's been like. And I like to start with this photograph. I am the cute little baby in the middle. I was 1 year old at the time. My father, I guess on the right, he was a very brilliant mathematician. And he was Jamaican. Both of my parents are Jamaicanos. And my father got a scholarship to University of Cambridge in England, which is one of the top universities in the world. And so he studied there and did a PhD in mathematical physics. So I was born in Cambridge. So I'm a British citizen. I actually have 3 citizenships, but I was born in England. And then this picture that you're seeing, this photograph, was taken in Toronto, because my father's first job was at the University of Toronto in Canada. And so we moved there, and I have 2 younger sisters who were born in Toronto. My father died very young, 38 años, murió de cáncer, prostate cancer. And I was 14 at the time when he died. So this is a photograph of his funeral. And his brother, my uncle Leslie Robinson, was also a professor of mathematics. He died in 2007. And he started the actuarial science program at the University of the West Indies in Jamaica. So after I left Canada and went to Jamaica, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. My parents, going back to Canada, my parents separated when I was about 6, and my mother took the 3 of us to Jamaica. So 3 children. And so we grew up in Jamaica. And so I went to primary education, primary and elementary school and secondary school, I should say, primary and secondary in Jamaica. My favorite sports were football or soccer and table tennis. And then after that, I did a degree myself in mathematics at the University of the West Indies in Jamaica, as Jose mentioned. After graduating from that, I taught high school for 3 years. And then I thought I'd like to do some more studies. And so I went to the University of Delaware for 2 years and did a master's in statistics. Following that, I registered for a PhD in statistics, but this time I decided to switch universities because Florida State had a very good department of statistics, one of the top in the country. And so while I was at Florida State, I guess by now, 1982, I was about 28 years old, 28, and I had a big decision because one side was I could do a PhD in statistics, and then I would have a career as a statistician, not really quite sure, where I would work. But the complication was I had a very beautiful honey waiting for me in Jamaica. And so should I return to Jamaica and connect with my honey? So if I went back to Jamaica, what would I do? Well, at that point, that was actually the first time that I considered if I went back to Jamaica, I could become an actuary, because for someone with my qualification, that was one of the few things that I could do in Jamaica. So here I have this choice, a PhD in statistics, go back and hook up with my honey and do SOA exams. So what should I do? I went for the honey, people. I chose the honey. So that was one reason. It's not the reason I became an actuary, but it's true that the decisions were very closely tied together. So we got married in 1983. And so I started out working in Jamaica, and I'll track my career on the next slide. So just talking about what has my career been like. I break it down into two things. One is the actual jobs, the types of jobs I've had. And then in my next slide, I'll talk about what I call my leadership career. So as I mentioned, after graduating from University of the West Indies, I taught high school for 3 years. And then I went and studied and came back. And when I came back, I joined a firm called R. Watson & Sons. Now, if any of you has ever heard of the firm Willis Towers Watson, it's a very large global firm. I don't know whether they have any offices in Mexico, to be honest. I don't know. But for some strange reason, R. Watson & Sons, it's a British firm. Well, it was at the time, based just outside of London. And they had a small office in Jamaica. So I joined R. Watson & Sons in Jamaica. I got my ASA in 1984. So that took 2 years because I passed my first exam in 1982. And so that it didn't take me long to get my ASA. And then I thought, if I'm going to do fellowship, which I always recommend people consider, I would like to be in the States. I was doing the Society of Actuaries exams, and I thought I would be better off if I were in the United States, where being in the environment that I was being tested on. So fortunately, Nationwide in Columbus, Ohio, was willing to file for my immigration. And so I moved to Nationwide in 1985. Got my FSA in 1994. It took 10 years, and that's actually too long. It doesn't need to take that long. But I was not studying for the exams properly, and that caused it to take too long. So you will see from my career that I worked at Nationwide. I actually did 10 years. I moved on to a smaller company, Fidelity and Guarantee. I was there for about 1.5 years. Loyal American. I served as their appointed actuary, which is a very important role. But I was only there for about 9 months. And then I went back to Nationwide and did another 10 years. And then my last life insurance company was Hartford Life. Hartford Life does not exist anymore. in Connecticut. So after that, I got a new job with an organization called Capital Region Both Seas doing this OPEB. And OPEB, it's kind of an interesting combination of pensions and health. If you know what a pension is, you know what happens. I know that Mexico does have a national pension system, and some of your employers may also have their own plans. But a pension is lifetime income. So when you get to a certain age, such as 65, the pension begins and it's payable for the rest of your life. Now, OPEB is similar, except that it's not it's not a pension that you get. What you get is the employer says, we're not going to pay you a pension, we're going to pay your health insurance premium for the rest of your life. And they purchase the health insurance from some health insurance company here in the US. I don't think it's very common outside of the US. In fact, health insurance is not a huge practice in most countries in the world. So I did that for about 6 years, and I was doing work for about 130 clients. So following that, I was living in Connecticut at the time, and my second wife, unfortunately, my Jamaican honey and I divorced in 2004, and I got married again. And my second wife is from Minnesota, and she wanted to move back to Minnesota. So we moved to Minnesota, and soon after we got back here, I decided to take a job with the state of Minnesota as a life insurance regulator. I retired from that on July the 30th, but I still have a very small firm, Robinson Associates, and I have one pension plan. It's a 30-life pension plan. It's a very simple plan, and I do work for them once a year. So in terms of leadership, I look back at it, and as president of the Society of Actuaries, that's kind of perhaps the ultimate in leadership that I will attain personally. And so starting out, first of all, when I was a teenager, 13, 14, I was president of my church youth group. And then when I was at teaching high school, I mentioned that to you, the government of Jamaica made a policy that they wanted to have a representative from the staff on the school board. Now, the school board is the group of people that manages the affairs of the school, oversees, what the principal and the staff are doing, and sets the direction for the school. And so we had a little election in the staff, and I was very surprised that I got elected, because there were people there who had taught at that school for 20 years, 30 years, and I was sure that the staff would choose one of them. But they saw something in me that perhaps I didn't see in myself, and so I got elected to the school board. Later on, I'll point out, I was chair of Nationwide Insurance Company. They formed an actuarial diversity committee, and diversity has been a big part of my career, and a big part of the reason that I'm president of the SOA today has to do with diversity. I didn't put it on here, but I was also the captain of one of the soccer teams. Nationwide had a soccer league. It was a co-ed league, men and women. And I was the captain of the Actuaries team, the mean reserves. For those of you who have studied anything about reserves, you may know what that term means. And we were quite competitive. We weren't just nerds on the field. So in addition to that, later on, I became the vice president and then president of the International Association of Black Actuaries, which is based here in the United States, although there are a couple of branches of it, what we call affiliates in Canada, one in Toronto and one in Montreal. I got elected to the SOA Board of Directors in 2013. And in the Society of Actuaries, all of the fellows, now we have fellows and associates, all of the fellows, and if you are an associate for at least 5 years, you have to be an ASA for 5 years or a fellow in order to vote. And so I was elected by the members, and this is something that is very important to me, that the members thought enough of me to elect me to their board. So first time around was 2013. I served a 3-year term. Actuaries Without Borders does not exist anymore. It was a section within an organization called the International Actuarial Association, which does exist today. And I served on that AWB, we call it AWB committee, for 3 years. And then finally, the one that I'm in now, I was elected SOA president-elect and vice chair in September of 2021, and again by the members. And I find that to be very important, that the members thought enough of me to make me their president. And I am the first president of the Society of Actuaries of Black African descent. There's some stories around that, but that is generally the case. So I'll serve a 3-year term. From 21, the board year starts and ends in October, and I was president-elect from 2021 to 2022. This year I am the president, 2022 to 2023. So my year will end this October. And then there'll be one more year as the immediate past president. And then they will tell me, adios. Okay. So let's turn now a little bit to the profession itself. And one of the questions that I have been asked from time to time is, why should one become a FSA? And in particular, why should, other than that, why should one become a fellow at all? And what I find is that to become a fellow, now there are several countries that offer fellowship. It started in England, started in the United Kingdom, England and Scotland, and then it spread to Australia. There are several countries, Canada, South Africa, China has fellows, India has fellows, Hong Kong, Taiwan. So these countries all have fellows, and they follow this tradition of having a very rigorous set of exams that are based on not only theory, but also applications to business. And this is very important, because if you're going to be an actuary, it's one thing to like maths, but you really also need to have an interest in business. And in particular, the first business that actuaries tend to get involved in is the insurance business. And so that combination, math and business, is really what it takes. Becoming a fellow of any of these organizations, I like to think that SOA is the best, but that's always debatable. I find fellows in the Caribbean. I started in Jamaica, and there were fellows in Jamaica before me. Trinidad, Barbados, Bahamas, St. Vincent. Now, remember, the Caribbean tends to be former British colonies, right? We were all colonies of England. And so the British traditions is what you would expect in the Caribbean. And what I find, the reason that I think fellowship is desirable is that insurance regulation is getting increasingly complex. And the best example of that these days is still a new thing called IFRS 17. It's very, very complex, and it needs that level of expertise in order to really manage it well and make the sort of decisions that need to be made. With IFRS, it's kind of a principle-based process. That is, each company has to figure out how to implement it. And so it takes experienced actuaries to make the sorts of decisions as to how to make that thing work best for their particular company. I'm going to talk a little bit about data science, because that has been a kind of source of concern within the Society of Actuaries, and not only this profession, but other professions. What we find, and you may be seeing that in Mexico as well, is that students who might otherwise take actuarial exams, they prefer to take data science and become a data scientist. And the skill set, the skill set of data scientists is somewhat desirable. Of course, data science occupies many more industries than does actuarial science, but sort of in the typical mode. We tend to be insurance and pensions and not much else. Some countries, I know South Africa has got a lot of actuaries in banking. And in Australia, they have a lot of actuaries in a lot of things. And I'm going to Australia this year, and I hope to learn more about how they managed to accomplish that. But anyway, what we found in 2015, and this was when I was on the board the first time, was that we did not have enough data science in our exams, in our ASA exams. And so we added it. And then we added some more in 2021. We didn't think it was enough. And so we added some more. And so we find that actuarial students, I mean, even if you're going to become an actuary, you do need to know what's going on in data science, the new fancy tools with R and Python and what have you, and random forests and all kinds of new things that when I did my master's back in 1982, there was absolutely no way that we could do the sorts of things that can be done today with a few clicks on a laptop. It is quite a new world. And so what you need to know is far more than I ever had to learn at the time. And your future is going to be very different than my past. And so I encourage folks, if you want to become an actuary, to learn as much as you can at the university in data science, and take that knowledge with you into the actuarial world. So what makes an actuary unique? And this is something I do like to talk about, because we talk about actuaries and data science and this and that. What makes us unique? And what makes us unique is that we're not just one thing. It is a combination of subjects. And I've listed a few of them here, especially when you become a fellow. By the time you get there, you've learned some actuarial mathematics as an ASA, some statistics or data science, if you will. You've learned some computer science. You certainly have the mathematics that you picked up. But then you get to other things. Whoops, hold on. Just a minute. I didn't mean to do that. Okay, so let's resume from current slide. Sorry about that. And so you get into some more advanced things: investment, hedging, accounting. Which discipline combines mathematics with accounting? It's only the actuarial profession. We need to know a little law. Why is that? Because an insurance product is a legal contract, and you have to know what that is and what the implications of that is. And of course, we study risk management and all of that. And so all of these things are sort of come together in what you learn, what you're trained in by the time you become a fellow. And I think I left out regulation, right? You have to know what the regulations say, whether it be regulations in Mexico or whichever country you happen to be in. I didn't put that on the list, but the regulation is a very, very important part of what we do, because we don't work in the vacuum. We work in the real world, and regulation is a big part of that. Of course, I'm speaking as a former life insurance regulator. One of the nice things about being a fellow is that generally you can work anywhere. As long as the employer wants you. I mean, there's nothing wrong, for example, if an employer in the United States wanted to hire someone who is a fellow of the Actuarial Society of South Africa, that's fine. And that fellow is going to bring some expertise, as long as the immigration needs can be met. So there is a certain amount of portability in being a fellow if you want to move from one country to the next. The last point I'll make here, I think, is important. I think a lot of times we in the actuarial profession think, well, we should be doing this and we should be doing that. And and we should be having a lot of influence on the world scene and this and that. And I remind folks that there are only about 100,000 people with our designation. That's not a lot. And that's, I mean, globally. And the Society of Actuaries itself accounts for about 32,000 of those people. So we are a small profession. It's not going to get, it's not going to get big anytime soon. And so I remind people it's not going to get big in a hurry. Societal purpose, I know, was on the brochure that was sent out about this session, and it's becoming increasingly important what that really is, because I think a lot of times we think of actuaries as being someone who is very well paid to do what they do. Of course, you studied hard to pass your exams and so on, you're well paid. And we don't stop to think that the actuary is really serving society, doing any good for society. And I know I start from the fact that we do good for society just in what we do, because we provide financial security for hundreds of people, millions of people around the world, whether they have life insurance products or pension plans that actuaries are advising, provided, of course, that the client follows the actuary's advice, which doesn't always happen in the world of pensions. But we're doing the best we can to make sure that that people get the benefits that are due. The Mexican National Pension Plan is going to have actuaries. They're going to be there looking at the plan and making sure that that the money is there. Well, they don't make sure the money is there, but make sure people understand what money is needed to fund the plan. Some of you heard recently in France, there was a huge problem because the government of France wanted to increase the retirement age from 62 to 64. That is an actuarial problem. Now, the people in France didn't like it, but it's an actuarial problem, because the idea is, if you wait another 2 years, it costs the government that much less. So it's an actuarial problem, it's a longevity problem, and of course, it created a social problem. But there are real genuine actuarial considerations. Whenever you hear that sort of thing, there are some real genuine actuarial considerations going on in the background. But, that's just our day jobs. And we worry about, what are we concerned about the world around us? We live in an increasingly complex world, and one of the big challenges is climate change. And so actuaries are beginning to take a look at that. It's not easy, because the problem with climate change is that it is change. That is to say, the past is not an indication of the future. And so anticipating and envisaging and even modeling out the future is a complex proposition. But actuaries are working very hard, particularly in the area of, there's climate change, but then there's climate risk. And when you think of risk, you think about, insurance or entities that mitigate risk and help. So as you can will appreciate, you do need to understand the sort of climate risk challenges in general insurance. I've spent my career in life insurance, and there is somewhat less of an impact there. But if you're insuring people's homes, people's property, people's cars, and there can be more wildfires and earthquakes, and then it becomes a real challenge when you're talking about general insurance, otherwise called property casualty insurance. But in addition to that, we're also looking at some other societal needs, and this is sort of growing. It's in its infancy in the Society of Actuaries right now. And one of the things that we have been looking at are the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Now, some of you may be aware of that, and that's one line of thought. There's another line of thought called ESG. And I know the SOA is looking at that, as are several companies, and trying to figure out, what can we, first of all, what can the organization of the SOA, as the SOA do, but then also what can individual actuaries do to sort of help to further those objectives. By the way, I will tell you the Society of Actuaries, I mean, there are 32,000 members, but there's another side to it, which is a staff. So the staff is the people who manage the exams. They manage all our meetings, and it's a staff of 160. So it's a big staff, at least for our organization, and they have all the issues that an employer would have nowadays, trying to figure out how to make people work from home and things like that. So there's the staff side of it, and then there's the member side of it. Okay, so we have talking a little more about the SOA. We have about 32,000 members. I think I've said that before, and then 35,000 candidates. So these are people at various stages. And I think we have our exams now in about 80 countries. We offer our exams in 80 countries. And what we're trying to do is to advance actuaries as leaders in measuring and managing risk to improve financial outcomes for individuals, organizations, and the public. So a little more about the SOA. We're driven by what's called a strategic plan. And the strategic plan lasts about 3 years. We're on the 2022, 2023, 3-year strategic plan. And we have successive plans. After this one, there'll be another one. And there are 3 major things that we're working on this year. One is we've had a problem with engagement. When you're 32,000 members and they're spread out all over the world, they don't always feel connected to each other. It's very difficult to get that. And so we're trying to figure out ways to better get people feel connected to the organization and to each other. So that's one sort of work stream. The second one is we want to prepare actuaries to be business leaders who leverage technology and actuarial judgment to create responsible risk solutions. And so it has to do with education and credentialing. We've made some changes to the ASA, and we're always looking to improve our education products. And then there's education and research globally to meet the opportunities and challenges ahead. The SOA is committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I'm pleased to say, when I joined the board in 2013, we had nothing, zilch. And thanks to the influence of myself and others, we have now found that DEI is very important to the organization, and in all its forms. When I started looking at diversity, I mentioned working with diversity when I was at Nationwide. We thought of it initially as race and gender, but gradually we added other attributes to that list. And now it's then it was just called diversity. And now we have equity, which is fairness, as opposed to unfairness. And then we have inclusion, because if you have diversity, so you have all these different voices, but if those voices are not included, if they are not heard, then you might as well not have diversity. And so diversity requires you to also have inclusion. One of the challenges that we face here in the United States as a profession, and we're not the only profession with this problem, is underrepresented minorities. And so my vision, and this is something that I have been publicly writing about, and I'm in a position now where I can influence this direction, is that by 2100, the percentage of Latinos in the US actuarial profession is close to the percentage of Latinos in the US population. I say Latinos because I expect that includes my audience here, but we have a similar ambition, similar goals for African American and Native American, who are the people who were here long before Christopher Columbus got here. This, of course, is a huge challenge, and it's a dream of mine to see us begin down that road, but I have to do some persuading to get there. Okay, in terms of the ASA curriculum, this is the ASA pathway, and I would just look to the right-hand side if you are interested in knowing, what are sort of the requirements going on. VEEs, and Jose, you may be aware of this, VEEs, those are actually going to be based on courses that you do in college. And so those are not courses, those in green, verde, those are not going to be things that the SOA will set. And so if you take certain courses, and Jose would best be able to tell you what applies in your particular college, you will qualify, you may qualify to get the VEE, meet the VEE requirements. And then there's a series of exams that are multiple choice. The ASA exams, for the most part, are multiple choice. And then some of them are project-based. So if you're doing something like data analytics, it's probably better to give you a project and say, hey, you write a program to do it and analyze it and so on and so forth, than to give you some multiple choice test. So we designed the thing based on what works best in terms of making sure that you're all properly educated. Then we have a few e-learning modules, which is just reading for the most part, with possibly take-home assignments. And there may be some kind of assessment at the end because you have to prove that you actually did the reading. And then one of them is a seminar. I'm thinking that is the professionalism course that every person who is going to become an ASA has to attend. So I do want to talk about, what does it take to become a fellow? And the SOA has an exam system, and then there is the students who might want to take the exams, but there's a third party, which is very important, and that third party is your employer. And the reason I say that is that once you maybe you pass a couple exams while you're at university here, and then you get employed, and you still have a long way to go to get to fellowship. And so what I benefited from, and everyone that I know that is a fellow, had the benefit of their employer's support. And so I had to find an employer. In my case, it was nationwide in the US, but even my employer in Jamaica, it was the same. And so what did they do for me? Well, they paid for my exams. They paid for my study materials. I got time off of work to study for exams. And some of those exams are quite difficult. So you really do need that time off where you can just be thinking about the exam and nothing else for at least a couple, 2 or 3 weeks. Every time I passed an exam, I got an increase in my salary as an incentive to keep doing it. And then finally, you get management training. A good actuarial development program will send you off to courses or whatever, or bring courses to you that help you become a good manager of people. So the role of the employer is critical. And of course, that's not something that it really is up to the employers as to whether they want to provide this sort of infrastructure or not. So my hope is that, those in Mexico will want to do that and make sure that folks are properly trained all the way up to fellowship. Now, if you haven't done that yet, Jose, I don't know where you are with the VEE, but yeah, there is a little process. You have to write into the SOA and they'll tell you exactly what, So are you eligible now for VEEs? Do you offer it now?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, good. All right.
Of course. We're already listed in the VE website. So
okay,
yeah.
Great, good. Let's move on. So what's an employer looking for? And this is important. Again, becoming an actuary is not just about you and the SOA. It is you and the SOA, but there's more to it than that because it's an entire career. So they want you to be capable. Can you do the work? Your experience, your education, whatever certifications, you have the knowledge and you have the skills. Motivation. Is it something you want to do? A lot of times I hear from students, yeah, I've heard about the actual profession and I like statistics and I like math and so on. Well, that's a part of it. But as I mentioned earlier, you're working in business. So do you like business? And some people do, and some people don't. And so if you don't like business, you won't be motivated to work inside an insurance company. Why would you? You would want to be doing something else. And so are you passionate, even if you have the ability, are you passionate about what it is that it takes to be an actuary, what is required of you? So it's satisfaction, pride, your talents, ambition, passion, and engagement. And then culture. Companies want you to be able to either fit into their culture or at least be additive to their culture. I think when I went to Nationwide, I was probably the first Black person that they've ever hired as an actuary. So, so in a sense, I was culturally a little bit different in that regard, but they said, we want that. We want that difference. And so sometimes culture is bringing something different. And bringing something different, like all issues with diversity, can be a plus. But will you thrive? So the location, I worked at Columbus, Ohio in the Midwest. A lot of people don't want to live in the Midwest. They prefer to be in New York City or Chicago, where it's exciting, big cities. Are you interested in the industry? Do you really have a care for insurance? Accountability and sort of thing, all of these things, relationship oriented. You're going to be working on teams, a lot of times teams, not only with actuaries, but other professionals. How do you handle that when you all talk different languages, in a sense? To become an actuary, you do need a well-rounded sort of education. It's more than education. It's really just your whole being. There's technical skills involved, but then there's also leadership and teamwork, right? And then finally, I can't tell you, communication. The actual subject matter is very complex. And actuaries are the only ones who can take all that complexity and bring it down to something that your principal, the person who you're advising, whether it be the board in an insurance company or the board of a pension plan, you have to tell them a story that they can understand. You can't expect them to speak your language. You got to be able to translate that into something that they can do. And successful actuaries synthesize all of those different subjects that I told you about, and then are able to tell that story. All right, so about the SOA, a fairly new development. Up until recently, you could not be a member of the SOA until you had your associateship, ASA. Prior to that, you had really first of all, the good side of it is you had no dues, right? Nobody had to pay dues to the SOA. You did have to pay for your exams, but you didn't have to pay for dues. But what that meant is that for that time, you're really not connected in any way to the SOA other than through the dues. So we started a couple of memberships. One of them is an affiliate membership, and this is free. And pretty much any candidate, any student, and your influencers can join. And by influencers, we mean people like Jose, your parents, teachers, people who are likely to have some influence over your decision, your career choice, whether it be to become an actuary or to become a doctor. That's sort of what we mean by influencer. And they can join, and that way you can all find out about what the actual profession is. That's really what it's for. There is no requirement to maintain your membership. You can cancel it at any time. There is no code of conduct. As a fellow of the Society of Actuaries, there is a code of conduct that I must abide by, but nothing for this level of membership. The other thing which is fairly new is that up until recently, you never got anything from the SOA until you got your ASA. So let's take my case, there were 5 exams. It's a little different now. You saw the chart. But you could go through all those exams and you wouldn't have anything to show for it from the SOA until you got to your associateship. So now we've introduced a few micro credentials, and these are things that you can get along the way. And so the first one is the pre-actuarial foundations. I think you get that if you've passed P and FM. If you've passed, I think that's right. I may be wrong. The best way to find these out is to go to the SOA website. So that's pre-foundation. So that really, P and FM really don't talk much about actuarial. It's just mathematics and statistics and financial math. The next one is actuarial science foundations. And so this has some of the other things, perhaps the life contingencies, long-term and short-term insurance now, where you're actually learning some actuarial concepts and you're thinking in an actuarial context. And then the last one is the data science micro-credential. And we do have that. I think you may have to earn the first two first, and then you get that third one. I'm not sure. But these are stepping stones along the way to associateship. And you can put this on your LinkedIn page and say, yes, I got this from the SOA. And by the way, I don't think you need to be a member, an affiliate member to get these micro credentials. As long as you've passed the exams, you can get them. And then of course, being a affiliate member is free anyway. I'm going to stop there. And I've told you a little bit about my life and my career. I've talked, I think, a fair bit about the SOA and hopefully some touch points as they pertain particularly to you students at the stage that you're at. And at this point, I'm quite happy to answer a few questions.
For the different technologies that they are bringing to their call center.
All right. Thank you, John. Thank you for the talk. It was absolutely interesting. Now we have some time for questions from the students, from the people that are listening to you. So I see many people from many places. Okay, so who'd like to address the president of the SOA to ask him a question?
All right.
Don't be shy, guys.
Oh, I can stop sharing.
All right. Okay, there is a question.
All right.
And that's Eduardo Ori. Hi, Eduardo. How you doing?
Hi, doing well. Thank you. Thank you, Jose.
Amazing.
If you want, I'm going to start us off so that people, get in the mood of asking. So first of all, thank you, John, for joining us today. First of all, I have a self-serving question, if you may. Hopefully it doesn't take a lot of time, but I used to be a fellow. I got my fellowship in 2008, but now I switched careers and I dropped the credential. How should I refer to myself? Am I a former fellow or an inactive fellow? I just want to be correct when I talk about my former credentials of the Society of Actuaries.
I would not know. No, I have to be honest now, because you may use those words a little differently in Spanish than I would in English. But an inactive fellow, I would say, is just one who is not acting as a fellow. So you might have the designation, but you're not acting in an actuarial capacity at all. So a person might refer to themselves as and what was the other word? A former. If you've actually surrendered the designation, so you're no longer a member of whatever organization it was, then former is probably the way to do it. Now, no, I assume you would only do that because it was relevant to something. Right. So I guess former would be the more appropriate term, at least in the way I would look at it.
Okay, thank you. And the real question, John, and this came up 20 years ago when a former president of the society came to the Universidad Anáhuac. I think his name was Robert Brown, again, 20 years ago. And the topic came up of the new actuaries with quotations and with a pejorative mantra. And the new actuaries, what they referred to as the new actuaries back then, it was the actuaries that were not employed in the traditional fields like pensions, insurance, and in Mexico, maybe this is an FYI, but there's a lot of actuaries. I don't have the percentage, but there's a lot of actuaries in finance, but not only in consulting of pension funds, but actually in banks and financial institutions, trading floors. So in Mexico, I don't know if in the rest of Latin America, that is happening a lot. And there's a little bit of overlap with the CFA credential, for example.
Yes.
So I guess my question is that something that you see in the United States, for example, of actuaries branching out to fields that are not traditional in the actuarial field, and specifically in the financial system? Because in Mexico, it's mind-blowing how many actuaries are gravitating towards that field. And part of it is because, you know, there's not a lot of pension plans in Mexico. There's no thousands of insurance companies. There's probably less than 100 or less than 50. So what are your thoughts about the actuaries branching out to the financial services industry? And is that happening in the United States?
This is a very, very interesting question. Very, very interesting. First of all, the short answer to the US is no. Right? That's the short answer. But what I do find is that there is a lot more of that sort of thing happening in two places. One is Australia, and the other is South Africa. To my knowledge, where actuaries are, and you say Mexico, you say actuaries are working in, sometimes they use the word wider fields. You will see that term if you follow that discussion. Sometimes they will use the term non-traditional employers and that sort of thing. And so what I think is happening where it has sort of successfully occurred is that actuaries get their training, you know, as associates, as fellows, and then they find themselves in a situation that's not, you know, not the normal thing in terms of insurance, pensions, those sorts of things. There is a feeling, and we're actually going to have a debate on this at the upcoming International Congress of Actuaries, but since you're not a fellow, you probably won't be checking that out. Having to do with, should actuaries not be sort of expanding, breaking out into other things, all right? Okay. And it sounds very attractive in the sense that, you know, as you say in Mexico, there are only so many opportunities. I know the same is true in Jamaica. There are only so many opportunities for life insurance and pensions. And Jamaica can probably, I think the last number, probably can support about 12 fellows, all right? So there is a limit when you're dealing with small countries. There is a limit. And so there is this push to have, you know, this momentum to have actuaries get into other fields where they can use some of the things that they learned and apply them in these various things. So my question though is, and the thing I look at, I'm still searching for an answer. All right, if I'm an actuary, I'm trained as an actuary, let's say I have my ASA, and I go work for a company, and based on the fact that I've done a certain amount in data science, right? So I go work for them as a data scientist. Now, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, right? You're leveraging what you've learned and so on. My question is, are you doing actuarial work? What makes the work actuarial? Now, an actuary can do work, but is that work necessarily actuarial because it's done by an actuary? And where I start with this, and again, my thinking is evolving. Of course, I soon retire and it won't matter anymore, but my thinking is the actuarial value proposition is that we synthesize certain things, right? We bring together mortality with investment, with law, with regulation, with biology, and we bring all these things together. And that is what makes us uniquely, in my view, actuaries. So if an actuary is doing something else, more power to him. But is he or she actually doing, the answer to that may be yes, and it may be no. Actuaries in South Africa have pioneered the role of actuaries in banking. And how it came about is somewhat interesting, because I think one of the motivating factors was that there was a bank in South Africa that was owned by an actuary. That obviously that actuary had a hit. And this actuary said, you know, this bank has risks and we have a risk capital. There's such a thing. And certainly I can have the actuaries are used to doing these things in insurance. I can have them do something similar in my bank for the bank, similar to what they do in insurance. And sure enough, it caught on. It caught on. And so I think what happens in the US by comparison is that, yes, banks in the US may have the same risks and the same needs, but they find other professionals to meet those needs, right? I think that's what's going on in the US. And so, so each situation is a little different as to how it shakes out. Australia, I asked the president of the Australian Actuaries Institute, Australia, I said, tell me how many industries actuaries are in Australia. And she said dozens. Now, she couldn't stop to count them, right? But I imagine it's quite a few. And I think in their case, I suspect what happened was, you know, there are only so many places only so many insurance companies, similar to Mexico. And so it may be similar to Mexico in the sense that there are only so places you can do the traditional work. And so you get outside of that. And unfortunately, fortunately, the employers are willing to accept you. Because that's the thing. If the employer won't accept you, US banks will not accept actuaries on the same scale, anywhere near the same scale as insurance companies. If they won't accept us, there's nothing we can do about it on our own. So the fact that in Mexico, the employers accept that, in Australia, they accept the fellow is a big part of why that success occurs.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eduardo, for your question. You know, actually, as another side of Eduardo's question, there is this, John. In Mexico, absolutely no employer will take the role that you were talking about during the presentation, except, of course, for those transnationals who work in Mexico and, for instance, in the US. So that is the biggest limitation we have in the Mexican market to become, for instance, fellows of the Society of Actuaries. I'm not saying that there are no ASAs from Mexico or fellows of the Society of Actuaries from Mexico, but they all work either in the US or somewhere else.
Right.
So maybe what we need to do is to turn our heads to what they do in, for instance, Australia or other countries, because as a teacher, I am invested in, for instance, becoming an FSA, right? Mm-hmm. But should I be working in the market? Not to mention the financial market in Mexico, I'd be more invested into, for instance, getting the CFA credential. So that's a big limitation we have. Mm-hmm. Do you think that we should indeed turn our heads to what they do for instance, in the Australian case?
Sorry, in what?
In the case of Australia.
Well, what I know, what I was referring to with Australia is the fact that the actuaries have got into these other areas. I am not sure whether, I would have to think that some of them at least are helping students to pass exams, right? I would have to think some of them, but I really don't know for sure. When I'm going to Australia, and I'll have a better chance to talk to folks there. But yeah, hopefully those employers are providing some sort of inputs to help them get to somewhere, but I can't say I know that for sure at this point.
I understand. Thank you, John.
Mhm.
Guys, are there any more questions? Okay, I see some researchers actually here.
All right.
Robert Hernandez, Efren Salvador. Hi, guys.
Hello.
Hello, yes, Robert.
Nice to meet you. It was a great speak for all of us. I just want to make a question or maybe a comment.
Sure.
What could you recommend to the actuarials, young people that are here in Mexico in order to internationalize their career? What do they need to accomplish here in Mexico? Of course, we have a program at the universities that is, well, trying to match the actuarial syllabus of the Actuarial Association, International Actuarial Associations, but there are many technologies that are game changers. So what you specifically courses or skills would you recommend to best fit in the, let's say, US market, European market, or maybe in this case, Australian market?
Right. Well, I mean, I think in terms of the university, and you're probably doing it already, you're going to provide the basic, the VEEs, that content for sure. You're going to provide the basics in the mathematics, the statistics, the economics, the accounting. And that's about, that's about all that I think the university can do. Because you really learn, okay, one way to look at it is that I have a good friend who is an attorney in Jamaica, and he went to law school, and they studied 3 years for a degree, and then you take 2 years and you get a license. And then he went to work for his first law firm, yeah? And day one that he arrives at the law firm, he is assigned a senior, right? Now, this senior is an experienced lawyer, and the job of this experienced lawyer is to teach this young man how to be a lawyer. There are things you learn in books, but how you become a professional is you must learn that from other professionals that have gone ahead of you. So there's a limit to what you can expect at the university. You're just laying the foundations. And then now it becomes, you get into the workforce and you get mentored in a professional sense, directly or just by, watching how other people work, by people like me. And so in becoming a professional, that's really what it's going to take. I have a young man who just got a job in Jamaica. I think he has passed 4 SOA exams. And he just got this job. And I said to him, who is going to be your senior? Because if you've just gone to university and you have 4 exams, you're really not qualified to make actuarial decisions on your own, right? So you need to have someone who preferably is a fellow above you to say, give you guidance. These are how the things should be done, or these are the things that need done. Now, this is what needs done, and maybe he's bright enough to figure out how to do it, right? So he's going to use Excel or something else as his choice. That's fine. But exactly what to do and why to do it needs that wisdom, needs that actuarial judgment to guide him. So there's a limit as to what you can expect universities to do when it comes to, growing someone into a full professional.
And well, considering also mentoring programs, because at the end of the day, I think actuary professionals can provide value to business decisions in the current industries. So it's quite important what you say, that it's not only having a degree in actuarial science, but also receiving mentoring for a senior consultant maybe, or a manager, in order to have these skills to translate business or customer decisions into
Sure.
action.
Yeah,
technical.
and it's not necessarily a formal mentoring program. I think, you know, I don't have any one person or even two persons that I consider mentors. But if I have a question, I find one to answer that question. You know, I'll reach out and find anyone who answers that question is my mentor. And so to your students who you think about mentoring, there may be sort of formal programs. I'm in a formal program with the IABA. I'm assigned a mentor. He's in Ghana. We talk every once in a while. Yeah, that's formal. But you can always get mentoring, because if you ask an experienced actuary a question, chances are they'll answer it for you. It doesn't really matter whether it's a formal thing or not. But the whole idea is becoming a good professional. You learn from those that went before you. That's how you learn it.
Thank you very much, John.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Robert, for your question. Have you guys got another question? Maybe from the students, Andrés, Cristel, Fer, Hugo Alejandro, Iris Mabel.
Yeah, from the students.
Yeah, that'd
This
be
is for
nice
you.
to hear from you guys.
This is for you.
Hugo Alejandro has just given you a...
Esto es para ustedes.
Exacto.
Preguntas.
Okay. Okay, I have another question, but this is I mean, just as Eduardo stated, this is maybe a self-serving question. So
Right.
I'm sorry about that. Okay, you know, we are, I mean, myself and four of my colleagues are working on a couple of textbooks written in English and covering some materials which are contained in the SOA exams. So maybe we were thinking that it'd be possible for us to apply for you know, credit, SOA credit, right? I mean, in exchange for writing those textbooks. I don't know if that's possible. So
No, I think the short answer, I don't think they would like that. I think, you know, there's an equity question here, and we have a bit of a challenge that I'll tell you about. Yeah, we kind of do want everyone to get credit for becoming an ASA, becoming an FSA the same way, and that is by examination. Now, we have instituted recently something called UEC. It's University Earned Credit, where I think there are only about 13 universities that signed up for it. But if you're a student in those 13 universities, you can get SOA credit for certain exams. But it's very tightly regulated. It's very tightly managed. One of the things that happens is that let's say that there is a course that the university offers, and it may be one semester, maybe 2 semesters, but if they do that work, the SOA will give them, say, course FM. All right. So let's just, for argument's sake, say FM is eligible. Well, one of the criteria, or one of the things that the university has to do is the professor has to set the final before the term starts, right? And that final has to be approved by the SOA and say, yeah, this final is good enough so that if the students pass it, we will give them credit. So it's very tightly controlled, and so, but it sets up a seeming inequity, because what I hear from people out there is, you know, the SOA is given credit for exams over here, which are hard, and then they're giving credit over here for university courses which are easy. There's a public perception that what we're trying to do is to find a way for people through their university to get credit, and we may expect them to get high marks. But then you get this perception out in the street that because it's a university course, these people are getting to pass easier than others. So there's a big equity issue that we have to be careful of.
Hi.
Yeah, my wife we're in a hotel room. So
Sorry.
there's a bunch of students looking.
No,
at
it's
you.
okay.
Yeah. So and professors. And so we have to be very careful not to create too much inequity. Everybody, as much as possible, we want people to follow the same path. Otherwise, it can lead to a reputation risk, really, quite frankly, for the SOA. If we are seen to be, favoring some people, making life easy for them and not others. So
I understand.
fewer ways to get the credit is going to be the better.
I understand. I believe that the follow-up to that question is, are these 13 universities maybe some colleges of actuarial excellence?
Yes.
Excellency? Yes.
So what they did, what the SOA did, they wanted to try and find a way to give credit to universities. And so they looked first and asked first the centers of actuarial excellence, because those are those are the top ones. And there are 38 of them, but actually only 13 of them have so far agreed to participate.
All right.
And I think it has to do with things like what I just described, where a professor may not want to if I'm teaching in a college or a high school or whatever, I want to set my final based on what I think where my students are at least a little bit, Yeah. And if I have a very bright class, I might set a harder final than if I have a mediocre class or so. So the professor may want that flexibility and not want to set the final before, too early. So some universities say, no, we're not going to do that. And so that's why there are only 13. I think that, that's the sort of reason why only 13 have signed up.
Okay. However, I believe that is a nice option, a nice way. I mean, we should look into that.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, guys. Have you got any more questions? Because otherwise, I believe it's okay. So I believe that's it for the day. Okay. So thank you very much, John. We appreciate very much your being here and you addressing our students and the rest of us as teachers. So thank you very much for your time, for the talk. And we'll be in touch, definitely.
All right, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right.
And virtual clapping.
All right. Good.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye. Thank you, everyone. Bye.